All right, so what we want to do today is first off the bat, I wanted to make everyone aware that next Sunday, that's 1 week from today, we'll have our first test, real test. You know, today we're going to have a fake test, but next Sunday will be our first real test, and that test will be over chapters 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to have a test right when you sign on or you come tomorrow, next Sunday. That'll be what will happen right away. There'll be a test. And again, it's over chapters 1, 2, and 3. So we will actually kind of review a little bit today, and we'll talk about some of the important points. But as always, I want to give you all a heads up that if you really want to get ahead in the game, if you turn to your workbook to the Purva Swadhyaya, where is it now?
28, Maharaj, 28.
28, yeah. You turn to Purva Swadhyaya, right. That's where your questions are going to come from. And we'll only be having questions over Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3. So the rest of the 4, 5, and 6 will happen at the end of the course. So we're doing half of the test now, and then our next week, and then the other half of the test will happen at the end of the course. And I think something like 30% of your grade comes from these two tests, the actual test, and then I think about half of the grade comes from the 2 essays, and the rest of it comes from everything else, you know, your shlokas. And by the way, maybe you all have noticed that on our WhatsApp, there is now two more people on there, which is Glikaria and her husband Dharmaraj. So Glikaria has been our sloka hearer, the person who hears people's slokas. When you can contact her on WhatsApp, or you can call her directly because her number is there, and she's on our Bhagavad Gita chapters 1 through 6 WhatsApp group now. So because she's on there, you can call her directly, and for the men, they can do their slokas to Dharmaraj, her husband. So they have volunteered to help people with the sloka memorization. And as you all know, or you should know here, that there is a, let me go there.
I'm sorry, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Then means I just see numbers. How do I know which number it is for the name?
We just see numbers.
What number? What is?
Telephone numbers.
Oh, you don't see.
Telephone numbers.
On WhatsApp?
Yes.
Well, you can, as far as I know, on WhatsApp, if you actually just go to WhatsApp, you should be able to click on their name, and then there should be an option on WhatsApp to actually call, isn't it? Am I missing something?
It's only if their name is labeled, like that they save the name, or if the name is not saved, there's like maybe a little like hyphen or something that says Glikaria next to the name, next to the number.
Okay, so I will post their actual telephone numbers on the Dharmaraj has one. You won't be able, well, I guess you could, but
it has a +44.
Yeah, you won't be able to call that one. Not at least with your landline. That's England, But he has another number, the one that Glycaria gave me first before she gave me that number, that is a local number. It's a New York number.
Is it 202?
What's that?
603? 202. There's another number above. It's 2 lines.
For him?
No, yeah, there's 2 that were added. And this number.
Yeah, one of them is Glycaria. And
Okay.
let me see. Let me go to our... So you can't... Okay, yeah, her number, Glycaria's number is... So you all can write that down. I'll say it again. So that's Glycaria's number. And Dharmaraj's local number is... So that's his local number for the men, you know. And so that should have taken care of that aspect here. So there are official TAs, or teacher's assistants, for this thing. And as you can see here on the Zoom, these are your slokas that you'll memorize: 2.7, 213, 220, 244, 327, 42, 48, 49, 434, 522, 529, and 647. I hope you don't feel like this poor what's his name now? Who was being chased by the Sudarshan Chakra.
This is
Bhagavan
no.
Muni.
It's see who can remember first. Durvas Muni, right? Durvas Muni. Yeah. Durvas Muni was the one who... I hope you don't feel like that. But if you try to go over them, you know, quite often, you know, a lot of sloka memorization is down to just trying to do it over and over again. And you get into the rhythm of it after a while. And, you know, it really isn't as hard as it seems. And it's important to get started early on this, because otherwise it'll be really hard to do it the last few days before we do it, or you know, after you've taken all the tests and everything else, the last thing then you have to do is to do your slokas. You don't want to be doing that. That's the way I would do it, and it's bad.
Maharaj, I have a question.
Yeah.
So on 23rd, do we have to sit down for closed book test, sloka?
What's that?
Do we have to take the test for all 3 items? Closed book test, sloka, and also the essays, or just the closed book test?
No, there, as maybe you know, that we have 2 closed book tests. That's the one we're taking next week, and the one we're taking at the end of the course. 2 closed book tests, and those are you'll have to past those. And then besides that, how do you get this? Oh, I know. Where is it here? No loop, please. Oh, I see. So,
this Loka recitation test is also on 23rd?
no, you won't be tested. Those you will have to do in your own time, sometime before the end of the course, So, right. So here is our schedule. As you see that day 5 is the 23rd. There'll be a closed book test over chapters 1 to 3. And these slokas just have to be finished by the end or before you get your diploma. You can't get one if you haven't done your slokas. And also the 2 essays have to be in sometime before you get your diploma. So that's the way it works. There's no set date for either of those 2 things, just that you have to do it before you. So it's best if you, don't drag it out or do it at the last minute, because it gets overwhelming towards the end to try to do it. You have a test, and you have to do your slokas, and then you have to write your essays, None of these things are really monumental. They're not that difficult to do. You just have to stay up with it is what the issue is, Okay. Any other questions on this issue of slokas or essays or closed book tests? Okay.
Well, I had a thing I wanted to maybe help with everyone breaking down the slokas. So we have 12. There's 6 weeks, 2 a week.
Yeah, something like that.
That's 1 every 3.5 days.
Yeah.
And Maharaj, I wanted to know with the diplomas, what name will a name go on there? Or?
You can put whatever name you want there. That's the way we usually have been doing it.
Okay.
So, whatever name you desire. Okay, so now we'll get right into the material itself here. Let me get set up here. I almost got it. No, I did get it. So we did a little bit of chapter 2 already. So these were, this is the, breakdown, at least one of the versions of the breakdown. This is the one you'll see in your book, in your student handbook. This is the way they break down chapter 2. Arjuna's further doubts and surrender 1 to 10. Jnana fight, there's no death for the soul, 11 to 30. I think of that as the not the body section, 11 to 30. Karma Conda, prescribed duties, gain material sense enjoyment. That's 31 to 38. That's that strange section where Krishna's telling Arjuna that people will laugh at him if he doesn't perform his duty. And then the Bhakti Yoga 39 through 53. Krishna is basically telling Arjuna that he should act, but not and try to enjoy the fruits of his action. And then the last section is Stita Pragya, which is 54 through 72, where we find out about how someone gets fixed. Could you do me a favor and close that door so we don't keep hearing the phone upstairs? All right. So this is another way to look at it. Arjuna's doubts and surrender 1 through 9. You're not this body, 10 through 30. Duties of a Kshatriya, 31 through 38. Bhakti Yoga is 39 through 53. And Arjuna's 4 questions is 54 through 72. Whatever helps you. These won't be on the test. You don't have to remember these sections, but they're there for your ability to digest the material, so you'll understand how chapter 2 breaks down. Now, this is just chapter 2. We're not talking about the whole Bhagavad Gita. We're just talking about chapter 2 here. So Arjuna's doubts and his surrender, you're not this body. So 10 through 30 is the not the body section. Duties of the Kshatriya, 31 to 38. Bhakti Yoga, Arjuna's 4 questions. Okay, so...
The screen before this, are we going to get copies of...
Can you pick that up
yes.
whenever you talk?
The screen before this particular screen,
Uh-huh.
Are we going to get a copy of overview?
Yeah, you're talking about that?
Yes, the overview.
That's what I said is in your book.
It's
in
your
it's in your student handbook.
Okay.
It's on page
25.
Thank you.
yeah. Bhaktivatsala is 25?
Page 20.
Yes.
What questions?
No.
She's asking about the additional notes, right, Maharaj? And
What's
charts
it?
of Bhagavad Gita?
The overview.
No. That is an overview, but it's not the one I'm talking about. The one I'm talking about is on 19. Actually,
18.
well, yeah, 18. There's one version of it there, and there's another one on 20.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the one that you see right now, that one's on page 20.
Oh, page 20.
Again, there's a number of ways to break it down. I'm not a stickler about it. You won't be asked to break it down, but again, it's for your own ability to be able to get a sense of where it's going. So these were, we talked about this a little bit last week. This is another flow now. What are we hearing now?
Every so often, it's like a prayer or something. It has a bell like a church.
Oh, okay. All right. So this we'll go over very quickly. It's I think it's touched on in this part of the Bhagavad Gita because it kind of helps us to understand how the chariot of the body is arranged. Prabhupada puts it in the purport. It's not mentioned specifically in the Bhagavad Gita verse itself, but I believe it's in the purports. And we see that this picture is quite helpful. It's a very good analogy or a very good metaphor. So we have the horses or the senses. You see each horse has a sense on the little shield in the front of the breastplate of the horse. There's an eye, a nose, an ear, a tongue, a mouth, etc. So these are our senses, and the senses are pulling the living entity towards a very certain direction. And the mind is the reins. They're those, reins that go from the mouth of the horses to the hand of the driver. The driver is the intelligence, the body is the chariot, and the self is the passenger. So you'll notice the self is just free. He's not pulling the horses. He's not in contact with them any particular way. It's the intelligence that's in contact with them. And so the idea is the intelligence is the connecting device to the senses, and it should be pulling the senses in a specific direction. So if we're pulling the senses in a specific direction, then we understand that we are going according to our own plan. Otherwise, if we're not pulling the senses in a particular direction by using the intelligence, then the senses are directing us. We are the victim of the senses. They are pulling us wherever they want us to go. And as we can see, if you were driving a chariot and the horse was deciding where it was going to go, where would you wind up? And the answer is, we don't know. And the fact is that there's not just one horse, but there's 5 horses. So we could wind up over a cliff or anything, because even the horses don't agree among themselves where they want to go. So that's the chariot of the body. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. It's also one of those things that just kind of helps you to get a grasp, a grip on this chapter, on chapter 2. Anyone have any questions about that?
Maharaj, I have one question.
Okay.
Self is the passenger, right?
Self is what?
Passenger.
Self is passenger.
Right, right.
The chariot is body. Okay. Yeah, that and range is mind. What is it?
Yeah. The range of the mind. So the intelligence should be doing the driving. The intelligence means that we know. How do we know? How does the intelligence know where to go? The intelligence knows, or should know, because of Shastra. So the intelligence has been reading and understanding Shastra, then the intelligence knows where to push the mind. And by pushing the mind, the senses are then pushed. So the mind is just a connecting element in this analogy or in this metaphor. It's only a connecting element. So if the mind is being pulled to the right or left, or it's saying, my dear tongue, we are not going to do what you want, or it's saying, my dear eye, we're going to look in a different direction than you're looking now, then the intelligence is controlling the senses by controlling the mind. So the mind is just like the connecting device, nothing very elaborate there. This is just one metaphor. There are many metaphors, but this is just one metaphor for the mind. You'll see, and I discussed this the other time when we were doing this earlier in the year, that the mind can mean other things in other situations, but in this particular metaphor, the only thing we mean by the mind is that connecting device that connects the intelligence to the senses.
So Maharaj, then for the intelligence, there is basically, it didn't show up in here, but we gather all the intelligence from the Guru, Shastra, and
Yes.
Grantha.
Right,
So
right.
this is not there.
Guru Sadhu Shad, it's not there.
So that is the entry level, which is input to the intelligence. So which is going to be try, follow everything. And if we don't gather intelligence, the mind is like mad, what do you call it?
Yeah.
Mad horse. So
Well,
mind is gonna,
what actually happens in real life, and what we see as in the material world, most people are not directing the senses through the mind, through the intelligence, and the intelligence is not fixed in Shastra. So what's happening instead? Instead, the horses are almost wild. There is some direction going on, but the intelligence is only directing things based on sense gratification. So if 2 horses are competing, going opposite directions, the tongue wants to taste something, but the eye wants to see something, then the intelligence, instead of Shastra, the intelligence decides, well, which one do I want to do more? Do I want to see something more, or do I want to taste something more? And so in that way, the the intelligence is making a rationale for sense gratification. It's deciding which kind of sense gratification is more important. And that's how most people live their lives. This is not a good thing, but nevertheless, that's how most people live their lives. Okay, so now, we are going to be tested on these. These next slides are ones that you will get tested on. The Six Opulences of Bugawan, these are listed by Parashara Muni. And I've listed them in Sanskrit and their corresponding English. So you can break them into two sets of three, B, F, K, and R, S, and W. In this case, the English is in alphabetical order. And these are the Sanskrit versions of them. I'm not going to go over them in any great detail right now, because we will, in a little bit, in a breakout group, have all of you helping each other to memorize these so that you can list them, because they will be on the test. Now, why does it do this? I can't get it to just go one step ahead. Now, here's another thing that we'll see a lot of. This is the way the Mayapur Institute decided was very important. These are snippets of Sanskrit, and these snippets of Sanskrit, they want, because Prabhupada comments on them in the purports, so try to recognize what they mean. There's a whole bunch of them, and you'll see these words of chapter 2, words of chapter 1, and this is what we mean, Kshudram Hridaya Dorbalyam is from Bhagavad Gita 2:3, and it means petty weakness of heart. And Dharma Samuda Chetaha, that's from Bhagavad Gita 2:7, and it means confused about my duty. So these are the, Sanskrit translations, and they're very key in the verses, and the Mayapur Institute feels that these are very important. So they are listed as questions. As I say, you will see them in your Purva Swadhyaya. And because the Purva Swadhyaya lists them, that means they'll be on the test. Not every question from all the Purva Swadhyaya will be on the test. Only a small assortment of them will be. But you never know which one will be and which one won't be. So you have to stay aware of these words of chapter 2. Now, what I did was I went through the Mayapur Institute student handbook, and I pulled out all these words that were important, words in the Bhagavad Gita, and I put them all together along with their meanings. So they're all in one place, and in this way you all can study them. I'm going to return back to this in a minute. But here's some more. Anu Atma, Bhagavad Gita 220, Vibhu Atma 220, minute particle soul and the super soul, words of chapter 2. These are Sanskrit. Here's some more words of chapter 2. Kshatriya in 231, Swadharma. Kshatriya means one who gives protection from harm. Swadharma means specific duty. So can be on the bodily platform or liberated platform. So again, these are words of Bhagavad Gita. So we have Vyavasayatmaka Buddhi here, this is 241, and Stita Progresya, that's 254. That's where it is in Bhagavad Gita. And, Vyavasayatmaka Buddhi here means resolute intelligence in Krishna consciousness. And Stita Pragesha means one who is situated in fixed Krishna consciousness. So I made an effort to kind of pull these together. And if they're pulled together, then you'll be able to study them easier. They're all in one place.
Maharaj, these words are in the slide, right?
What's that?
The slide you put it in 2 weeks before, is it in that slide also? Because you put the slide in the word.
Yeah, this is, I've added some slides, so each time I change and add and update the slides that we have, I will copy them out into a PDF, and I'll drop it into the WhatsApp, group, and you'll have them all. So it'll be easier to study that way. Or again, alternatively, they're right in your student handbook as well. They're there too. So here I wanted to kind of because chapter 2 has a lot to do about not the body. As we said, all the verses from 10 to 30, which is 20 verses, actually 21 verses, are all Krishna explaining to Arjuna that he's not the body. And of course, as far as our preaching goes in ISKCON, we are constantly trying to explain this idea to people that they're not the body. And so these are very key verses. And we can understand the situation that there is a spirit soul, which is 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. And that spirit soul is within what we call the subtle body. The subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. It's not made of gross matter. Gross matter is earth, water, fire, air, and ether. But the subtle anatomy, or the subtle body in this case, is made of just mind, intelligence, and false ego. And at the death of the body, the soul and the subtle body, they leave the gross body. The gross body turns back in to the elements that made it up. We all know that well. Either the body is burned, as it is in India, or they put it in the ground like they do in the Western world. And the individual aspects or the individual components of the body break down. And when they break down, they merge again with what's called the sum total of the earth element, the water, the fire, etc., etc. They merge with those elements. This does not happen to the subtle body. Rather, the subtle body is on a journey now to a new body. Eventually, the subtle body will be placed into a new body somewhere else. And if the subtle body has very bad karma, the subtle body may wind up as a ghost. And what a ghost is just a subtle body with no gross body. That's basically what a ghost is. So the ghost has no gross body, so he has mind, intelligence, and false ego, and sometimes the ghosts are very powerful, can even move material objects to some extent. But basically...
So Maharaj, there's a question. So from the beginning of our life, we learn there is no ghost. Why you get scared? So this is not right then.
That's right. Ghost. There are ghosts, right. Right. I mean, people experience them all the time, And so what is a ghost? As we said, it's a person who died untimely, either was murdered or killed themselves or was very sinful. And as a result of that, now they are not able to have a gross body. They only have a subtle body. And as a result of only having a subtle body, then they suffer in many different ways. And eventually they get moved on. The Garuda Purana explains a whole lot about ghostly life, how people can get liberated from it, etc., etc. And, there's a number of ways it can happen. But sometimes people remain ghosts in long, long periods of time, which is not a very happy situation to be in. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
Maharaj, I have just one quick question, if you can just
Right.
a little bit talk about this. That you said when people die untimely, Maharaj, normally we say nothing happens without the sanction of the Lord.
That's right.
How do we understand that, okay, this was untimely or timely?
Right. That's a good question. The answer, of course, is that in one sense, the overall sequence of events is controlled by the Supreme Lord. The overall sequence is controlled by the Supreme Lord. But a person, according to their mundane karma, was scheduled to have certain things happen. So, the general scheme is that a person has some good things that they've done, some bad things that they've done, and as a result, their life now, as a result of their past good and bad karma, is sort of patterned out. That it's kind of sort of not in every detail, but it's mostly chalked out. It's mostly there. However, the Supreme Lord can change those things. If someone becomes a devotee, that karma gets set aside. Now, also, on some occasions, as a result of somebody's deliberate intentions, the normal course, the normal plan of the karma can be cut short or moved aside in some kind of way. Sometimes a young child can be pushed out into the street and the car hits him and the child dies. The child actually was supposed to have a longer lifespan, but suddenly this all happened, and it happened as a result of somebody's particular material meddling. Now the child will go ahead and have a long life, but in the next lifetime, and he'll pick up where he left off. So in one sense, we can say that still the overall, structure of karma is intact. But there's kind of a basic karma and the basic way it pans out. And then there are exceptional cases which happen sometimes. And in that case, we say that, karma was in some ways interrupted or overshadowed by some other thing. In one sense, no one can beat karma. In one sense, karma never makes any mistakes. But we see cases where it appears to make a mistake, or where it appears to be overshadowed or eclipsed or bypassed, or whatever you want to call it. But that's how I would reply to that.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question, comment, with regards to, in terms of the statement, there are no accidents. If there are no accidents, could it be that even though the child, as in that example, it appears to be, like an accident, but it's not?
Right.
Yes.
So from one point of view, you could say it's an accident. In other words, nobody was expecting it to happen. In that sense, it's an accident. From a karmic perspective, it was already in the works, so it happened that way. So again, that's how I'm doing it, or trying to explain it, that in the larger karmic picture, it's all factored in, And finally, when you get out to Krishna's desire, it's certainly all factored in. But sometimes the general flow of a person's life is interrupted because of unexpected karma, which came from a past life, possibly. And as a result, the person's life is cut short. Everybody expected them to live a certain length of time. Nobody expected a sudden disaster. But still, because of some past karma, that disaster happened and it cut their life completely short. So it's kind of shocking, or it's sudden, or it's unexpected. But it's still the flow of karma. Ultimately, it is the flow of karma. And sometimes, when we're talking about devotees, then it even gets more complex than that, because Krishna is meddling in that karma directly. He has things he wants to accomplish. And so it's said in astrological circles that you can get your astrology chart done. But if you're a devotee, there's the invisible planet called the Vishnu Graha, where it can mitigate or intensify the other planetary arrangements. You can't calculate it because it's invisible, but it changes it around, which is just a kind of more mechanical way of saying what we already know, that Krishna sometimes fiddles with karma. When he sees that a person would benefit from an intensification of the karma that was coming their way, so that they can make progress more quickly, then Krishna will intensify. However, if he sees that a person is serious about devotional service, he thinks, why does this person have to go through all the rest of their karma? I'm just going to write it off. So that's what usually happens. Krishna writes off karma rather than intensifying, but he can do the other thing too.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to skip these words of, because we'll look at them again. And there is this idea of sacrificial killing. Why is this done? This is something we see in the Bible, in the Old Testament. We see this in a lot of places, and we see it in the Vedas. And yet, we're vegetarian, we don't want to harm animals. So what's up with this sacrificial killing of animals? So the Vedic system is that a person who is performing a sacrifice can perform certain kinds of animal sacrifices, which are done by qualified brahmanas, and those qualified brahmanas can promote the animal to a human form in one shot. Usually the animal has to go through all the intervening forms until it gets to human life. We know there are 8,400,000 species of life. 400,000 are human forms, and all the other 8 million are various animal forms. And since animals cannot get bad karma, they're only burning off their bad karma, that at the end of an animal life, the animal is promoted one notch higher, one notch more advanced, one notch more conscious. And so the animal moves from one type of animal form, and on death the subtle body takes it to another animal form, and eventually going up the scale. This is what Prabhupada talks about when he talks about the evolutionary scale, not that the animal forms are evolving one from another, but that they are a spectrum, or like a hierarchy of various higher and lower forms of consciousness. We can see that the insect forms and the plant forms are very low-grade consciousness. They're not much detail there, not much understanding of the surroundings. There is consciousness, there is pain, and there is satisfaction that comes from food and sex. All that stuff exists on even the lowest forms of life. But only as you get towards the human form do you have complex emotions and a sense of society and a sense of so many other things. So usually that's why we don't harm animals, because they are evolving in their scale. We don't want to cut their life short, because then they have to come and take birth again to finish up that life, which is troublesome for them. And that means since we've done that, we have to incur that karma, and we will suffer as a result of it. However, there are prescriptions in the Vedas for animal sacrifices, and they're done for particular reasons, and those reasons, and the animal is directly promoted to a human life in one shot in a sacrifice, and that's why the animal is sacrificed. And on top of it, if the brahmanas who are performing this animal sacrifice, there are Gomeda and Ashvameda yagas, and there may be others as well, I'm not sure, but Gomeda are cow sacrifices, and Ashvameda are horse sacrifices. And these sacrifices, they sacrifice the animal, and the animal then is promoted to a human life, and the people witnessing the sacrifice can actually witness the animal being promoted to a human life. Now, if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be doing these kind of sacrifices. And that's why in the age of Kali Yuga, these kind of animal sacrifices are basically forbidden. And we certainly don't recommend them. There's nothing very important about them. You can get the same thing in many other ways, and you don't have to do it. But nonetheless, they are part of the larger Vedic system, and that's why, we can, find out about them. So here in the purport to 231, we have, in the battlefield, a king or a kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death, as the brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, the killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. The animal sacrifice gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another, and the kshatriya killed on the battlefield also attains the heavenly planets, as do the brahmanas, who attain them by offering sacrifice. So, this particular verse, I forget where it comes from. It's quoted from something, but it's quoted in the purport on 231. And the first, what's in quotation marks, is what's the translation of the verse, and Prabhupada's explaining it a little bit more. Any questions there?
Yes, Maharaj.
Marv, you were saying that they were doing these sacrifices and it's a different yuga, but in this yuga now, we have where there's circumstances and building, there's like infestation of things and stuff, rats and such. How do we justify killing of these animals, like insects and such? Like, how do we go about it?
Gee, I don't understand the question, I'm afraid.
Maharaj, I'll tell you. See, like for example, Maharaj, in a restaurant, there are rats.
Right.
We don't want to kill them because you just said we don't want to harm any animals, they're already suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But for certain things, we have to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we don't get the license and this. And even
Right,
if we
right.
try keeping everything clean, still they come.
Right.
So how do we now go about it?
Well, in general, we try our best to forego killing of animals, even insects and rats and those kind of creatures. But in general, it's impossible to live where in a rat-infested situation. It causes disease and so many other things. And therefore, you can kill these kind of animals in that kind of setting. If you are just dirty and you are not actually properly engaged in your own hygiene, and so therefore attracting such creatures, then you're incurring sin. But if you're doing your best to be clean and nonetheless they come, then you're within your rights to get rid of them. Prabhupada kind of walked an interesting line on it. There was the story Kaladri tells that one time he was massaging Prabhupada, and there was a mosquito, flying around. And Claudia was trying to catch it to smash it, and Prabhupada said, no. And then the mosquito landed on Prabhupada and said, now he's attacking, now killed.
But Maharaj, what
Hare
if we
Krishna
know?
Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
I would like to know when people do the animal sacrifice for demonic practices, do these animals get human life in their next life?
When people do what?
Demonic.
Like demonic things, demonic practices, when they kill the animal.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure what happens in those cases where people are doing actual authorized sacrifices. What happens? The animal is getting a lot of karma, and the people who are doing it are getting even more karma from doing that kind of thing. Unauthorized sacrifices are a whole other ball of wax. It's just straight up karma. You had something further you were going to say? Yeah, Bhaktivedanta.
Yeah, I was saying, Maharaj, in this case where Prabhupada, Sri Prabhupada is saying, don't kill the mosquito now, but now you can kill because it is going to attack.
Right.
But what Maharaj, if we know already in advance, then there is a mosquito and it will bite you, so just kill it now. So will I incur sin, or I have to wait?
Yeah. Good question. I think you would find many devotees would give you diverse answers to that. In general, I think my thing is cockroaches. I go through an enormous effort to keep my room very, very clean. Still, some of them go, and I know that if you let one or two go, then pretty soon you'll be killing thousands of them. So I feel like maybe I'll go to hell, or I'll incur a sinful reaction for killing 2 or 3, but it's much better than killing several thousand of them. I had to go through a whole thing with Indian meal moths, at one point, which multiply so fast it's unbelievable. But I didn't even know what they were up to at first. But I'll probably do my stint in hell.
All right, Maharaj, thank you.
Okay, so let's go forward here. These are some important things that we should recognize from this chapter 2. Something that you'll see time and time again is the yoga ladder. So it starts off with animal life, and then above animal life is Karma Conda, then there's Karma Yoga, then Jnana Yoga, then Ashtanga Yoga, Paramatma realization, and finally Bhakti Yoga. So this is not directly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, but the devotees, Burijan and many other, I think, acharyas, they discuss this concept of the yoga ladder. And it's a kind of progression as a person becomes more spiritually evolved. It's not that everybody will go through every step on this yoga ladder, but in general, this is kind of what beats what's more spiritually evolved. So animal life is that happy time where people don't follow any kind of Vedic or religious restrictions, and therefore they're getting gross karma for everything they do. That's what animal life is about. The next stage up is Karma Conda, where a person can understand that one needs to perform things in a pious way, that one can have their material desires fulfilled, provided that they do it in a somewhat religious or at least non-violent way towards others. Usually Karma Kanda indicates that one's following Vedic prescriptions, and those Vedic prescriptions are basic Vedic prescriptions that are mentioned in the Karma Kanda sections of the Vedic literature. Now, people who are performing Karma Kanda are certainly interested in their own material happiness. They are not performing it because they are pleasing God. God isn't in the picture at all. But they do know that if they just try to get happiness based only on their own material methods, then they're likely to get bad karma along with what they're doing. So they try to get material happiness, but with a certain sense of doing it in the good or proper way. So above karma, Conda is karma yoga, which means that one understands that there is a supreme now. In karma yoga, one understands that there is a God. However, one is not really trying to please God. Rather, not please God in itself, for itself, but one is trying to please God so that one can enjoy in the material world. That's why one is, engaged in karma yoga. So there are a lot of religious people all over the world, including, practically all the world's religions, who please God with the idea that the reason they're pleasing God is so God will please them. There's still the goal is material happiness. So that's where karma yoga is. Now, in karma yoga, what's different from karma kanda is now you've realized that there's a God, where in karma kanda, God doesn't figure into it. Now, above karma kanda is Gyan Yoga. Now, with Gyan Yoga, at the first point of your rising in spiritual evolution, is at this point one recognizes that material happiness is a fraud. That it's what everybody's looking for, but no one will ever really have it. It's a sure fail, So the Jnana Yogi recognizes that everybody I see around me is looking for material happiness, but no one ever really gets it. They get a little bit of happiness, but mostly life just bludgeons them back and forth by all sorts of cruel things. And in the end, nobody is really fully satisfied. So there must be something else. The Jnana Yogi sets about to understand what else there might be. So the Jnana Yogi is traveling through various sanghas, checking out various religions and groups and philosophies and organizations, reading unusual esoteric literature to try to figure out, well, what if material happiness is a fraud, then what is the real deal? What is it? So that's Gyan Yoga. And above Gyan Yoga is Astanga Yoga. That's where a person realizes. Yeah.
I'm sorry for interruption. Before we go from this yoga, are you saying that, like Karma Kanda and Karma Yoga, there are two different things?
Yeah.
So Kanda, which is the best one? Like Karma Kanda is the best one?
As you move up, they get better. So I put them in a hierarchy from lower at the bottom to higher at the top. So Karma Kanda is a lower spiritual realization. Karma Kanda means that you haven't realized that there's a supreme being. It doesn't figure into the picture at all. A person is just doing various formulas to enjoy in the material world. Now, in the Vedic system, that usually means one's performing various things according to the Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajur Veda. There are various kinds of sacrifices and things there, and you do those, and they give you, wealth. They destroy obstacles. They see that you have a nice husband or wife, that your children are doing well, that gradually your business flourishes. This is karma kanda stuff. There are sacrifices that are designed for that purpose.
So then, Maharaj, some people take the Nrsimha Kavach.
Right.
How do you think this one? Is it for just his own benefit?
Well, Nrsimhadev is an avatar of the Supreme Lord. Again, someone could be doing that because they actually see Nrsimhadev as the Supreme Lord. And again, someone could be doing it just because they think of it as a ritual that they do so that they can protect themselves from some kind of misfortune. So a person who's protecting themselves from misfortune is in the Karma Conda section. A person who is doing it, realizing Nrsimhadev is the Supreme Lord, but still protecting themselves from misfortune is more in the Karma Yoga section, and that's why we mention that only at Gyan Yoga do we start to question the universally accepted by most people concept that material happiness is both possible and desirable. That people below Gyan Yoga think that material happiness is both possible and desirable. But with Gyan Yoga, you've given that up and you're trying to find out what is the real deal now. And now when you get to Ashtanga Yoga, at that point, then we go to trying to understand the technical yoga system, which starts with yam and niyam, and then there's asana, and then there's pranayam, and pratyahara, on and on it goes. There's all these stages of it. It's a mechanical system for purifying the senses, which is actually designed to bring one to realize the Supreme Lord in the heart chakra. But usually, the way the yoga system is done in our modern world, it does not do that. Instead, people discover that they have mystic powers before they get to that stage. And as a result, they divert themselves into enjoying and exploiting their mystic powers. So, but there are some who actually instead try to, through yoga, merge with the Brahman, or alternatively, to try to experience some kind of special consciousness, which is, an ill-defined thing, but some do that. So the yoga system can be used for those purposes. But higher than that, of course, is really Bhakti Yoga, which is the top of the ladder. And Bhakti Yoga means that at this point now, you've realized that sense gratification or material happiness is a waste of time. You realize that there is a God. You realize there's a process to getting purified. You realize that pleasing God is the highest goal, and not because you want God to please you back. It's just pleasing God, full stop. And so that's why Bhakti Yoga is the highest of the processes. And this whole thing is called the Yoga Ladder. Now again, you won't be tested over the details of this but it's an important part of Bhagavad Gita, because what Krishna does in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is basically take Arjuna through all these stages in discussion. Krishna talks about these various different stages, and finally in chapter 6, and the very last 2 verses of chapter 6, Krishna explains that, okay, Arjuna, we've talked about all this other stuff. We've talked about Ashtanga Yoga. We've talked about Karma Yoga. We've talked about Karma Conda. We've talked about all these other things. But what I really want you to do is be a yogi. So that's, the next to the last verse of chapter 6. And the last verse of chapter 6 is Krishna telling Arjuna what kind of yogi he wants him to be. The kind of yogi that Krishna wants Arjuna to be is a bhakti yogi. That madgatena antaratmana, that one always thinking of him. So this is kind of, the first 6 chapters are a quick sort of overview of the yoga ladder. Now, Krishna never mentions it as a yoga ladder per se, but some of our acharyas do. And Burijan in his Surrender Unto Me describes it in that way as a yoga ladder. It's mentioned in our Mayapur Institute student handbook. You'll see that that diagram is also there, although they don't describe it or describe much about it. It's on page 26 if you're interested. So this first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is basically kind of a journey through the yoga ladder. And if you understand the yoga ladder, then you can understand where people are. Everybody's somewhere on this scale. They might be in between. And as I said before, one does not necessarily have to go through every stage. One can jump to Bhakti Yoga right away. Of course, if one jumps to Bhakti Yoga right away, there's usually quite a lot of purification that has to happen. Okay. So now, the last thing I want to talk about here in our introduction to Chapter 2 is this section, Stita Dhir Muni. Arjuna asks 4 questions in verse 54 of Bhagavad Gita. He asks 4 questions. And he asks about the Stita Dhir Muni. Now, why does Arjuna ask this? The answer, of course, is he asks it because Krishna tells him to be a Stita Dhir Muni. He's describing this idea of someone who is fixed in consciousness. So naturally, the previous verse, 253, we find that Krishna is saying this. I'll quickly here look it up. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. So this is kind of what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. So naturally, Arjuna asks in 54, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of those whose consciousness is merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk?" So Burijan and other acharyas, they kind of translate this verse for us to some extent. This is a metaphorical speech by Arjuna, and by Arjuna saying what are the symptoms, it means what are his characteristics, and what are the symptoms of such a Stita Dhir Muni? We find out in verse 255, where Krishna explains it in a single verse. And then how does he speak? So this is translated to mean how does he respond when people speak to him, or when things happen to him? How does he feed back? How does he respond to the things that happen to him? And this is from Bhagavad Gita 256 to 257, 2 verses. Krishna explains there. Now, how does he sit? Which means when does he not act, basically? How does he not engage? That's what Arjuna means by this curious thing of asking how this, very advanced person in transcendence relates to the world. How does he sit? How does he not engage? And there, Krishna explains from 258 all the way to 263. And finally, how does he walk? And what does he actually do? We know what he doesn't do now in the previous section. Now in this section, what does he do? And that goes from 264 to 272. So this entire section is one whole clump or cluster of chapter 2 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, from 54 to 72. And it breaks down in these 4 parts: the characteristics, the response, the way that the Muni doesn't interact, and the way that he does interact with others. And these are the ways, these are the parts where we find out about it. In brief, what are his characteristics means, Krishna says, someone who acts not for their own material gratification, but always for him, has given up all these imaginations of the mind and desire. Such a person is in pure consciousness. This is the Stita Dhir Muni, and this is what his characteristics are. This is also called a matpara in another place, and also a Stita Pragya. So there's several different Sanskrit terms that get assigned to the same basic concept. Just a second. Some water here. All right, so this is kind of, in a nutshell, what Krishna is saying. Now we'll go to how does he respond? Now, this is where Krishna explains that the Stita Dhir Muni, he does not get disturbed by happiness or distress, fame or infamy. He is free from attachment, fear, and anger. This is how such a Stita Dhir Muni can be described by the way he interacts, is by his not being disturbed. Now, then we go to the next one. How does he not engage? And in this sense, we have a lot of things Krishna is saying. He goes on a little bit about this aspect of it. And he starts off with this analogy of a tortoise withdrawing his limbs within a shell. We know how turtles work. If they're threatened, they just suck their arms and legs and head into their shell and their tail, and they close up and they're like a big rock. You know, there's nothing visible, nothing anything can do to them. So Krishna is describing that a person who is Stita Pragya or Matpara or a Stita Dhir Muni, such a person withdraws the senses. Now this, of course, presumes, or it is prerequisite on the idea that one can withdraw their senses. Now, unless a person has been engaged in devotional service, making an effort to withdraw their senses, then they're not going to be able to do that. So, but if a person is engaged in devotional service through sadhana, when there's need to withdraw the senses, a person can do it. And then this section, which goes from 58 to 63, Krishna describes at the very back part of it, he talks about this idea of how from contemplating objects of the senses one develops attachment, from attachment lust develops, from lust anger arises, from anger delusion arises, from delusion bewilderment of memory, and when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and one falls down in the material pool. There are 8 stages, and we're going to quickly look over that in a minute when I finish kind of talking about this section. And those 8 stages are, you will have to know those 8 stages, and they're in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verses 62 and 63. So that's where that section is. It's kind of ends that, how does he not engage? He not engages by understanding this, I call it a etiology, or a negative development, how one problem leads forward into a bigger problem. So contemplation doesn't seem like a big deal, but it traps one into becoming attached. Then when one becomes attached, one becomes lusty, which is a deeper level of attachment. And then when something interferes between them and their attachment, one becomes angry. And when one becomes angry, then one becomes deluded. People who are often angry, they no longer can tell anything very easily. They're completely bewildered about what should be done and what shouldn't be done, what's actually happening, what they imagine is happening, etc., etc. And then it goes down from there. Each one of these, stages is worse than the previous one. So if you stop it at the contemplating stage, you never get further downstream. But to stop things at the stage of anger is already very hard. By that point, you're deep in, and it's very hard to come back from that. So this is a unwanted, a negative downward cycle. So finally, how does he walk? What does he do? Well, we find out that he follows regulative principles of freedom, which is, the idea of devotional service, the idea of regulation, it's the idea of sadhana. All right, so let me see if I can get to that part where we find out what this. No, we're in chapter 3. Somewhere here. There's that. Oh, this you should focus in on too, is when a teacher is fit to be abandoned. This is mentioned in the 5th verse of chapter 2. When someone engages in abominable action or has lost his sense of discrimination. This is one of our, Purva Svadhyaya questions. And the 6 transformations of the body, you'll have to know. Birth, growth, remaining the same, producing byproducts, dwindling, and death. This is an example is given of Maharaj Ambarish as a Matpara, as we were talking about. This is this kind of Stita Dhir Muni. Where is it? Somewhere. I can't find it now. There it is. Stop now. I knew it was there somewhere. Whoop. There it is, finally. So these are the 8 stages in their Sanskrit and English. Jayato Vishayan, contemplating object of the senses. Sangha, attachment. 3, kama, lust. 4, krodha, anger. 5, samoha, illusion. 6, smriti, vibhramaha, memory is bewildered. Buddhi, nasho, intelligence is lost. Pranashyati, one falls down. So these are the 8 stages that are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 2:62 to 63. And you will need to know those. This is one of those things to have on your list. They're Purva Swadhyaya questions to prepare for, so you'll do well on the test coming up next Sunday. And so what I want to do, I'll leave a little bit of time for any wrap-up questions, but before the wrap-up questions, I want to say what we're going to do next, which is that I will figure out how to put you all into breakout groups, since most of you are online today, except for our Pushpanjali. I had to figure out how to connect Pushpanjali with somebody, since this is kind of a group thing. How many people do we have? 2, 4, 5. Well, maybe I'll put Gokuleshwari and Pushpanjali together by keeping them on this thing, and you can talk back and forth over Zoom.
Should I log in?
What's that?
I'm not logged. I left. I think.
Well, you can log in. Right. If you log in, then you can do that. That'll work too.
Okay.
That'll work too. So what I'll do then is these are the things that you all will need to review among yourselves. It's we got about a half an hour late start, so. I would say for the next 20 minutes, I'll put you into pairs, and I'll arrange everybody in the pair as a breakout on this Zoom conference, and then after 20 minutes we'll all come back together again. Now, during that time, you can look over these slides, and these are the ones that I suggest that you focus in on. You'll need to focus in on the 6 opulences. The 6 opulences, when a teacher is fit to be abandoned, the 6 transformations, these stages of fall down, and the Stita Dhir Muni. Okay, so in general, now it's logged me out again. This means Well, I'll just leave it be. So, you can collectively work towards helping each other to remember these different ideas and work from particularly chapters 1 and 2. Tomorrow we'll talk about chapter 3, so don't worry about chapter 3 today, but tomorrow we'll talk about it. And so Bhagavad Gita 1 and 2, if you look on page 28 in your student handbook, under Purva Swadhyaya, they're all on page 28. So Bhagavad Gita chapter 1, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. These are various questions that could be asked on the test next Sunday. So work with each other, and we'll come back together at 12:30. And now I'll put you into breakout groups. I may have to... Yeah.
Maharaj, so do we have to find those answers?
What's that?
Chapter 1 and 2. It's like, do we have to find those answers?
Well, those...
Like chapter...
All those questions are answered in the slides. I'll put the slides on your on the WhatsApp.
So we'll answer those.
Right.
Find those answers.
Right. And I'll put you in pairs. I'll put Gokuleshwari with Pushpanjali. I'll put Bhagavan Narahari with Arjun, and actually I put Bhagavan Narahari with Arjun and Yoran, and Bhaktivatsala can be with his wife. So let me...
We'll take more advantage.
What's that?
Two people together. Bhagavatam Prabhu and his wife will take some extra advantage.
Say what?
Saying that they have extra advantage.
Yeah, they have, because they're actually in the same room.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so let me... now it's harassing me because it's logged me out. I'm going to have to log out, which may mean that the entire Zoom will go down. I have to disconnect and then reconnect again.
So, talk to Arjuna Prabhu. If it's needed. Arjuna Prabhu, are you listening me?
Yeah, are we still on?
Yeah, we are still on.
Okay, good. So we didn't. So let me go to Zoom here and see if I can get everybody to make breakout groups here. This is awkward.
Yes, Maharaj, we finished.
Okay, right.
Field number 1.
Okay, but for some reason I can't get my image back. It appears to exist, but I can't see anybody. But
We can see you.
you can see me, I know, but I can't see anybody else. My thing got messed up somehow. At any rate, what I want to do now, if you can hear me, everybody can hear me out there?
Yeah, we hear you, Maharaj. You
Okay.
hear us?
Yes, we hear.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Maharaj, I'm not in the video.
Okay, so I want everyone to take a fake test right now. And if you go to WhatsApp, you will see the URL for the fake.
Maharaj, isn't we can have some time to do the fake test?
Well, about 15 minutes or something like that. It's all true and false.
Maharaj, we already did it.
What's that?
We posted it, Maharaj.
Oh my God.
What's that?
And I did Maharaj something so stupid. That's why I got little less marks, but it was all some English mistake.
English mistakes.
Yeah.
When-
Like Maharaj, if I say that everybody's hearing that, they may also understand.
So the fake test, I put it on WhatsApp. So if you haven't gone there, please go there and fill it out. It's, I think, 25 questions, each worth 4 points. And once you fill it out, it will tell you what your score is right away. And you'll see what the right answers were if you didn't make some of the right answers. I was trying to get this Zoom to move around and get smaller and bigger. Instead, now it's invisible. So I'm still up, I can tell, because I'm still talking to you all, but I can't see anybody. I can just see myself. And I can't see the Zoom window.
You should just go ahead, go right in there.
Do you see the...
Maharaj?
yeah.
Maharaj, when we post these fake tests, do you also go through it?
What's that? Yeah, I also go through it. It collects them for me, and I see the cumulative and what everybody did, and what questions got missed the most, and all that kind of good stuff. So at about 1:15 or 1:20, we should be more or less over by that time for today's session. But by that time, you'll have filled out the fake test.
We had just finished the exam. Is there anything else we're discussing outside of the exam?
Well, I was thinking maybe to just go over the exam after everybody finishes it, but since I've messed up the Zoom, I can't see anybody anymore, and I don't know how to fix it. As we see, the Zoom still is up, you all can see me, and I can hear you all, but I can't see you anymore.
I mean, we still can discuss that you seeing us.
Yeah, right. We can still discuss.
Let's discuss.
So just give a few minutes for everybody else to finish.
You already did the...
Oh my goodness. That was weird.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Jai Bala, that is Gokuleshwari, right?
No, no, Maharaj, that's me. Jayabala42@gmail.
Oh, that's you. Okay, Jai Bala. Okay. And who's DKHY89? BK Mitra, I know who that is. Gita D4909, I guess that's Gokuleshwari.
Yes, Maharaj. My Gmail is gita.d4909@gmail.com.
Okay. Like I was saying, these were a little too cryptic for me, so Jai Bala, that's Bhaktivatsala. Yoran Napan, I know who that is. DKHY89, that's a mystery.
So self-explained.
Oh. Why did it? This time it merged the results with last term. It didn't do that with the previous one.
Maharaj, should I write again?
What's that?
Should I write it again? I mean, I'll just take 3 minutes if it's messed up.
No, it's what's done was I thought that it didn't automatically merge the results with because I used the same fake test the last time, and the whole group filled it out, and I did the same thing for a fake test on the first chapter, and it didn't merge everything with the previous. I guess I should have renamed the test. That's probably where I made my mistake. If I had renamed the test to something different, it wouldn't have recognized that the two were the same. But it's all right. It just means that I've just lumped in everybody's score for 2 different sessions of Bhakti Sastri. Everybody's got their own individual scores, but I didn't want to see the previous scores for the people who took it a year ago.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Can I maybe ask you one question?
Yeah.
I was actually wondering, I was reading I think it was in chapter 2, in chapter 1, in verse 37, 38, that a Kshatriya should not refuse an invitation to gamble. I was wondering, why should a Kshatriya not refuse it invitation to gamble? Like to fight maybe, yes, but gamble is...
Yeah, right.
Because we should not gamble as devotees.
Right. That's part of the whole idea of Kshatriyas, always meeting any challenge, whatever kind it is, it's one of those things that's kind of a technicality as far as I can understand, and that's why Yudhisthira went through with the gambling, even though he kind of knew better, but he was cornered into it by the fact that he was challenged by Duryodhan, and even though it's not the same kind of thing as a fight in the open field, but still it's a kind of a challenge. So that's why I think he went through with it. And it's just part of Kshatriya code, I think. That's where it falls under, More than that, I can't say about it.
Okay, I submitted mine.
Okay, let me see. We've got 6 responses now. Let's see who we've got. We've got Jai Bala, which is Bhaktivatsal Jai Radhe. We've got Yarun Napan. We've got Gita. And we've got Pushpanjali. Who is Prince Bowman? Oh, we're getting pretty good scores, it looks like, except for Prince Bowman, whoever he is.
It was out of 104.
What's that?
104 points. I got 80.
You got 80, right.
So that means the other 24.
Joran got a perfect score.
I just submitted and I didn't do bad this time. Last time I was really
What's that?
This time I just submitted. I didn't do bad.
Yeah, you got 92. Giselle did 80. Our Gokuleshwari did 92. Joran did perfect score.
Give him big applause.
And you know what?
Joran did perfect score.
I answered the question because I just saw the zeros and the 1. I'm thinking 1/10,000. I know the tip is 1/10,000, but because I saw the zeros and the 1, I didn't really read.
Focus into right. I'm tricky on these. Yeah. I told you I'm evil on these, because since they don't count. What's that?
Perfect score.
What's that?
Perfect score. Who did perfect score?
Joran. Bhakti Joran.
I had one question wrong. I actually had a question about this.
Oh, really? Well, at least that's what the output says.
Yeah, it was. Let me see. It was under the 24th question. It said the yoga ladder starts with animal life and becomes the highest stage of prema in the category of Bhakti Yoga. Yeah, I didn't connect the word prema to the yoga ladder per se.
Okay, at this passed.
And I got one.
Well, I think anybody that, these are the same kind of questions you're going to see on your actual test, but again, remember that these will not be true and false on next Sunday's test. You will have to name, like, say, the 8 different stages of fall down. You'll have to name, say, for instance, the 6 different stages of the living entity, birth, growth, the remaining dwindling byproducts and death. You have to name those. You'll have to name that's the kind of questions you're going to get.
And I went against my whole part about never change an answer. I changed it from a right answer to the wrong.
It's a wrong answer.
It was about the killing of the animals, not considered violence, because the animal will be promoted to the heavenly planets.
Yeah.
Changed it from false, that's false, to true.
Yeah, well, the animal will be promoted, but not to the heavenly planets.
Right, and
that's why I put those kind of things there so that people are actually paying attention to what's going on. Okay, so anybody have any questions about the questions?
I have a question about the analogies.
Which one?
All of them. Like, should we also, are they also coming on the test, the analogies?
Yeah. There, you'll be asked to list some analogies, so be aware that part of your question on next Sunday's test will be to list analogies, what are they? So you should know 2 or 3 or 4 of them or whatever so that you can put them down.
Yeah, and for the essays, I thought normally it would be 1 essay per unit, so I was wondering if we have to do 1 essay or 2 essays?
2 essays for the entire unit. That's the way it works.
Okay.
And you can choose them. You can choose them from that list that I've shown many times.
They're in the
They're in the book. Here, it's this list here. That's batch B. There was. This is batch A. And then there's even a batch C. So there's a lot of possibilities, and you have to choose 2 of them.
Maharaj, I have one question where I went
Yeah.
The question is, Maharaj, 21. According to Bhagavad Gita, a fool will be undetected if he wears opulent clothes.
Yeah.
Right, Maharaj?
Right.
And in purport 2.54, Maharaj, sees written, it is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak, and certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks.
Oh.
So I thought, okay, he's saying that.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That question might be the other way. I didn't focus in on that.
Yeah, so that's where Maharaj I went wrong. I thought, it says well-dressed fool cannot be identified.
All right.
Undetected. But it's not true, because he can still be detected. I'm sorry. He can still be detected by
Any other
those other ways. Right.
any other final questions anybody has about the questions? So remember to study analogies. Remember lists of things. I put those lists in the PDF that I just dropped in the WhatsApp, so you can see all the slides, the newer slides. There's an older version of this in an earlier part of WhatsApp, but the more recent ones are more complete. There's more stuff to them. So
Maharaj, we didn't study chapter 3, but it will be in the test, right?
the test will be over chapter 3. Tomorrow we're going to study chapter 3.
Oh, okay. We'll do it in the class.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so then I'm going to sign out here. Thank you all very much for your interest. It's, I'm happy you all are trying to stay with it. It is a rigor, it isn't easy to do this, but because we're doing all these things, we're doing tests, we're doing, individual breakout groups, because we're doing these lists and we're doing fake tests. This helps the brain to actually absorb this material, and that way you can see how the Bhagavad Gita is actually laid out. It's a very important thing. So I'm very pleased that you all are trying to hang with us here. So thank you all very much. And now I'm going to figure out how I can even get out of Zoom, because I don't have the window. I may not be able to. We may be on Zoom forever now. I don't know. We'll be stuck here, Everybody else will go back home, but we'll still be on. on Zoom.
Zoom light. Zoom.
Yeah, let me
Zoom.
see if I can close out from going here.
Hare Krishna.
No.
All right, Maharaj, Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna, yeah, you all can drop off. I'm going to.